That night, under the crystal chandelier's glow, my mother raised her glass and joked that I was better suited to clearing tables than leading anyone. The entire ballroom erupted in laughter. I smiled, set down my name card, and decided to leave my family right there on the spot. They didn't know I had a backup plan and a demo in my purse, something that could swallow their entire Gala ecosystem whole. 3 months later, they stood at my company's door, begging to join. That's when I set my terms, then closed the door in their faces. My name is Elena Carter, and until that December night, I'd spent 32 years believing family meant something more than leverage. The Whitmore Winter Gala was my parents' crown jewel, 500 guests in the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Ridge Country Club, each plate costing more than most people's monthly rent. Ice sculptures shaped like swans flanked the entrance. The string quartet played Vivaldi while servers in white gloves circulated with champagne that sparkled like liquid gold under the chandeliers. I stood near the stage in my midnight blue gown, the one Victoria, my mother, had approved with her typical backhanded praise. "It almost makes you look like you belong here, darling." My role, as always, was to smile, nod, and ensure the evening ran flawlessly while my parents, Victoria and Leonard Whitmore, basked in their philanthropic glory. The Whitmore Trust had raised $12 million that year for various causes, though I'd seen the books only 40% actually reached the beneficiaries after administrative costs and vendor fees. But pointing that out had earned me a cold reminder from Leonard, "You don't understand the complexities of our world. Elena, just focus on your little operations tasks." At 9:45 p.m., Victoria took the stage for her traditional toast. The room hushed. She looked radiant in her emerald gown, diamonds catching the light as she lifted her champagne flute. "Before we celebrate our achievements," she began, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she'd perfected over decades, "I want to acknowledge someone special. My daughter Elena has been helping with tonight's arrangements." My stomach tightened. This wasn't planned. "You know," Victoria continued with a laugh that tinkled like breaking glass, "Leonard and I sometimes joke that Elena is better suited to clearing tables than leading them. But look, she managed to get all the name cards in the right places tonight." The laughter started as a ripple, then swelled into a wave. I saw Marcus Henley from the Tribune lifting his camera, capturing the moment. Board members chuckled into their champagne. Even the servers paused, exchanging glances. Leonard's voice carried from his table near the stage, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "The girl simply doesn't have the vision for this level of work. Never has." I kept my smile frozen in place, my fingers steady on my champagne glass, even as something fundamental shattered inside me. 32 years of diminishment crystallized into perfect clarity. Every suggestion that was actually an order. Every opportunity they'd blocked while claiming to protect me. Every innovation I'd proposed at Voyant Atelier that they'd dismissed as too ambitious for someone like you. The laughter continued. Victoria was saying something else now, about dedication and family values. But I wasn't listening. I was watching the faces the mayor's wife, the hospital board director, the CEO of Clearwater Industries, all of them complicit in reducing me to a punchline. I set down my glass with deliberate precision. Walked to my assigned seat at table 3, not even at the family table, and picked up my name card. Elena Carter. Operations support. Not even my full title from Voyant Atelier. They'd diminished me even in print. I tore the card in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the tablecloth like snow. Then I reached into my clutch and pulled out the USB drive I'd been carrying for 2 weeks, the demo for Gala Grid Labs, the platform that could revolutionize how every nonprofit in this room managed their events, the technology that could make their entire old boys network of vendors and kickbacks obsolete. I'd planned to show it to potential investors tonight, after the formal program. Now I had different plans. Without a word, I walked toward the exit. The crowd was still applauding Victoria's speech, but I felt eyes following me. Let them watch. Let them gossip about Elena Carter walking out on the Whitmore Winter Gala. At the door, I turned back once. Victoria had noticed my departure, her smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered. Leonard was already whispering to someone, probably explaining away my emotional instability. The valet brought my car a sensible Honda that Victoria always called embarrassingly middle class, and I drove away from the country club, from the family estate, from 32 years of being treated like an incompetent child playing at business. In my rearview mirror, the club glowed with warm light, full of people celebrating their generosity with money that would mostly never reach those who needed it. They had no idea what was coming, but they would. Every last one of them would know exactly what Elena Carter was capable of. The guest house on the Whitmore estate had been my cage for 2 years, a temporary arrangement, while I got back on my feet after leaving my apartment to work more closely with the family foundation. By 3 mem. That night, I'd packed everything I owned into 3 suitcases and my Honda. The security guard at the gate didn't even look up as I drove through for the last time. I checked into a Marriott downtown and opened my laptop. First order of business establishing complete independence. I'd saved $48,000 money Victoria didn't know about because I'd learned long ago to keep a separate account she couldn't monitor. By sunrise, I'd incorporated Gala Grid Labs as an LLC, applied for an EIN, and set up a business checking account with a bank that had no connections to the Whitmore financial network. The next morning, I called Mara Quinn, the product engineer from Voyant Atelier who'd helped me build the initial Gala Grid prototype in secret. Elena, I heard about last night. The whole office is talking. I'm starting the company. I cut in. For real. Are you in? Silence. Then, God, yes. When do we start? Within a week. I'd assembled my core team. Mara brought Jules Porter, our operations specialist who'd watched too many nonprofits burn through money on inflated vendor contracts. Theo Lane, a developer who'd built payment systems for 3 startups, completed our founding quartet. We worked out of a co-working space in the Riverside district, far from the country club orbit where my parents' influence reached, but I needed to understand the full scope of what we were fighting. So I started documenting everything. The Whitmore Trust's vendor list read like a masterclass in legal graft. Catering contracts marked up 300%. Venue partnerships that locked nonprofits into 5-year commitments. Donation processing fees that skimmed 8% off the top, triple the industry standard. And everywhere, the same names board members' cousins, golf buddies, country club cronies. Your parents aren't just running a foundation, Jules said, reviewing the papers I'd photocopied before leaving. They're running a feudal system. The pattern became clearer as I mapped it out. Young professionals like me were brought in to do the actual work, given impressive-sounding titles with no actual authority. We were window dressing, making the operation look legitimate while the real business happened in private clubs and closed-door meetings. And if anyone questioned the system like I had, repeatedly they were branded as not understanding how things work, or too ambitious for their own good. For 15 years, I'd accepted it. Every time Victoria introduced me as her helper instead of as operations director. Every time Leonard told donors I was learning the ropes despite my MBA and 7 years of experience. Every time they'd shot down my proposals for transparent financial reporting or competitive vendor bidding with, "That's just not how we do things." Darling. The rage I'd suppressed for decades crystallized into something harder, sharper. Purpose. We're not just building a platform. I told my team during our first official meeting. We're building a weapon against an entire ecosystem of grift. Gala Grid wouldn't just be software. It would be proof that events could run at 30% less cost with double the transparency. Every dollar tracked, every vendor vetted, every volunteer hour logged. No more phantom expenses or cousins getting contracts they couldn't fulfill. Theo pulled up the demo on his laptop. The real-time dashboard is going to terrify them. Donors can see exactly where their money goes, down to the penny. Good, I said. Let them be terrified. I knew the moment word got back to my parents. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Your father and I are concerned about your recent behavior. This rebellious phase is embarrassing. Come home and we'll discuss your future properly." I didn't respond. Instead, I posted on LinkedIn, "Excited to announce Gala Grid Labs bringing radical transparency to nonprofit event management because donors deserve to know their money is doing good, not lining pockets." Within an hour, I had 12 messages from nonprofit directors who'd been quietly frustrated with the current system. 3 wanted demos. My phone rang. Leonard this time. I let it go to voicemail. "Elena, this nonsense stops now. You're burning bridges you can't afford to burn. No one in this industry will work with someone who betrays their own family. Think about what you're doing." I thought about it. All right. I thought about every young professional trapped in the same system, every donor whose money was wasted, every nonprofit forced to accept inflated costs because they had no alternatives. Then I deleted the voicemail and got back to work. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build. Our first real test came 6 weeks later at the Hawthorne Animal Rescue Benefit, a modest fundraiser for 300 guests that the Whitmore Circle considered beneath their notice. Perfect for us. "Show them the dashboard," I told Mara as we set up in the community center's back office. The rescue's director, Patricia Hollis, watched nervously as our system went live. "Every ticket purchase appears here," Mara demonstrated, pulling up the interface on her tablet. "See, Mrs. Davidson just bought 2 tickets. The payment processes, minus a flat 2% fee, not 8%, and the funds are instantly allocated 70% to veterinary care, 20% to shelter operations, 10% to admin." Patricia's eyes widened. "Donors can see this, if you want them to. Full transparency or selective viewing your choice." The night of the benefit, everything clicked. Our QR code system eliminated the check-in bottleneck that usually created 40-minute waits. The catering module predicted consumption patterns based on real-time attendance, cutting food waste by 31%. When a volunteer called in sick, the system automatically notified backups and reshuffled assignments. But the moment that sold it happened at 7:15 p.m. during the live auction. A donor asked where last year's funds had gone. Patricia pulled up her phone, projected our impact report onto the screen, and showed every dollar's journey. The room went silent, then erupted in applause. We raised 18% more than their previous year. Word spread through the nonprofit underground program directors, development coordinators, the people who actually did the work while boards of directors took credit. My inbox filled with inquiries from organizations tired of the old system. Then came the pushback. Premier Events, one of the Whitmore Trust's preferred vendors, started spreading rumors that our platform had security vulnerabilities. Complete fabrication, but mud sticks. 3 organizations suddenly postponed their demos after receiving concerning information. "They're scared," Jules said, reading the latest whisper campaign in a nonprofit Facebook group. Someone claiming to be a former employee was saying I'd stolen proprietary information from Voyant Atelier. I called my former boss, David Reeves. "You know that's a lie." "I know," he said carefully, "but your parents have connections. The board is pressuring me to make a statement distancing Voyant from your venture." "Then make it truthfully. Say I developed Gala Grid independently, on my own time, with my own resources." He sighed. "Elena, they own 30% of Voyant's contracts through referrals. You understand my position." I understood perfectly. This was how the system protected itself through financial leverage and implied threats. But I'd learned something from watching my parents all those years. The best defense was a public offense. We launched our pilot program with full transparency for nonprofits, all operations visible to donors in real time. The Mapleview Community Fund's spring fundraiser became our showcase. 350 guests, a hybrid venue setup, and a complex multi-vendor arrangement that would typically cost $90,000 to execute. We did it for $62,000. The local NBC affiliate picked up the story. Revolutionary Platform Slash's nonprofit event costs ran on the 6 o'clock news. They interviewed Barbara Torres from Mapleview, who held up her tablet showing the live dashboard. "Our donors can see everything where every centerpiece came from. what every appetizer cost, how much our speakers received. This is what accountability looks like. My phone exploded with texts from the Whitmore Network, board members, foundation executives, people I'd known since childhood, all with variations of the same message. You're making a huge mistake. Victoria's text was different. You've declared war on your own family. I hope you understand what that means. I understood. I also understood what happened that night when we prevented a near disaster at Mapleview. Their regular caterer surprise. Another country club connection had miscommunicated about the vegetarian meal count. Our system caught the discrepancy 3 hours before service, automatically triggered our backup vendor protocol, and had replacement meals delivered with 20 minutes to spare. How did you know we'd need a backup? Barbara asked. Because I've watched these miscommunications happen for 15 years, I replied. They're not accidents. They're markups disguised as emergencies. The traditional vendors tried one more tactic, threatening to blacklist any venue that worked with organizations using Gala Grid, but they'd overplayed their hand. The Riverside Civic Center, 3 community colleges, and 2 convention spaces saw an opportunity to break the country club monopoly on nonprofit events. We signed partnership agreements with all of them. By the end of month 3, we had 12 organizations on the platform and proof of concept that no smear campaign could refute averaged 23% cost reduction, 18% increase in donor retention, and 0 emergency vendor situations that couldn't be resolved through our backup protocols. They're going to come at you harder now, Mara warned as we celebrated our first profitable month. This isn't just about money anymore, it's about power. I raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. Let them come. We have something they don't actual results. But I knew Mara was right. The real war was just beginning. The email leaked on a Tuesday morning. Theo found it posted in a private Slack channel for nonprofit professionals. Someone with access to Whitmore Trust's internal communications had screenshotted an entire thread. Project Porcelain. I read aloud to my team. Objective neutralize EG's disruptive influence before Q2 donor meetings. The thread was damning. Victoria had tasked their PR firm with creating a narrative about my emotional instability following a public breakdown. Leonard's contribution was more direct. Leverage vendor relationships to freeze her out. Make it clear that working with her means losing Whitmore support. But the worst part was the participant list. Board members I'd known since college. Vendors I'd recommended to the trust. Even Margaret Zhao, who'd mentored me through my MBA, had added suggestions about questioning my professional judgment given family history of impulsive decisions. They're trying to gaslight the entire nonprofit sector, Jules said, disgust evident in her voice. My phone rang, unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Iris Davenport, director of the Riverside Education Fund. We'd never worked together. The Whitmores had made sure of that. Can we meet? She asked. Privately. I have something you need to see. We met at a diner on the south side, far from anyone's usual circuit. Iris looked exactly as she did at Gala's Composed. Professional, but with an edge I'd never seen before. 20 years ago, she began, sliding a folder across the table. Your parents destroyed my first foundation. Inside were contracts, emails, board minutes. The Davenport Youth Initiative had tried to implement transparent financial reporting in the early 2000s. Within 6 months, they'd lost every major donor and venue partnership. Your parents orchestrated it, Iris continued. Not directly, they're too smart for that, but through whispers, through concerns raised at the right cocktail parties, through vendors suddenly finding conflicts. Sound familiar? I studied the patterns. It was Project Porcelain, version 1. Why show me this now? Because I've been waiting 2 decades for someone with the tools to fight back, and because she pulled out another folder. I've been collecting evidence ever since. This folder was thicker. Vendor invoices showing systematic overcharging, email threads discussing commission structures that were essentially kickbacks, a spreadsheet tracking which board members' relatives received contracts. The Whitmore Trust isn't just corrupt, Iris said. It's a RICO case waiting to happen, But no one's been brave or stupid enough to pull that thread. Which am I, brave or stupid? Both. That's why you might actually win. That night, I called an emergency team meeting. We'd been playing defense, responding to attacks. Time to flip the script. We go public with radical transparency, I announced. Not just our clients' events, our own operations. Every contract, every communication about Gala, every attempted interference. Let them explain why they're so threatened by accountability. Mara looked concerned. That's aggressive? It's necessary. They're using shadow tactics because they can. We'll drag everything into the light. We launched the Transparency Initiative that Friday, a public dashboard showing every organization using Gala, their cost savings, their donor satisfaction scores. But we also added a section called Interference Log, a real-time record of every vendor who suddenly couldn't fulfill contracts, every venue that mysteriously became unavailable, every whisper campaign traced back to its source. The nonprofit world watched, fascinated. Galagate started trending locally. Victoria's response was swift. A cease and desist letter from Brennan, Cole and Associates, the trust's law firm, claiming defamation and tortious interference with business relationships. I forwarded it to my new lawyer, Amelia Rhodes, whom Iris had recommended. Amelia specialized in nonprofit law and, more importantly, had zero connections to the country club circuit. They're bluffing, Amelia said after reviewing everything. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation and interference. They're the ones with documented evidence of that. Counter-notice them. Demand preservation of all Project Porcelain communications. The counter-notice triggered something unexpected. Evan Marks, my cousin and Leonard's nephew, called me at 11:30 p.m. I need out, he said without preamble. I've been part of Project Porcelain. They had me spreading rumors to my tech contacts. I didn't realize how wrong it was until I saw your transparency logs. I have screenshots. Everything. We met in a parking garage, his choice. He was paranoid about being followed. Evan handed me a USB drive with trembling hands. There's more than just the smear campaign, he said. There's a whole playbook, financial manipulation techniques, donor steering strategies, even a list of judges who've been cultivated in case of legal challenges. Why help me now? Because I watched that dashboard during the Mapleview event. You prevented a disaster they caused on purpose. They create these crises to justify their existence, to make nonprofits dependent. His voice cracked. I can't be part of that anymore. The files were devastating. But more than that, they were evidence. Amelia's eyes lit up as she reviewed them. This changes everything, she said. We're not playing defense anymore. We're going on the attack. Amelia Rhodes operated out of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, her office walls covered with whiteboards mapping corporate structures and legal precedents. She'd spent 10 years dismantling nonprofit fraud schemes. This was her specialty. First move, she said, uncapping a marker. We send preservation notices to everyone involved in Project Porcelain. They delete anything now. It's spoliation of evidence. The letters went out that afternoon. 23 individuals and organizations, all formally notified to preserve communications related to Elena Carter, Gala Labs, and any coordinated efforts to impact business operations thereof. Second move, we file for an injunction against interference. But here's the clever part. Amelia smiled. We don't just name the Whitmore Trust. We name every vendor and venue that's participated in the boycott. Make them all defendants. Make them all lawyer up separately. Fracture their alliance. While Amelia handled the legal strategy, I focused on the public narrative. No more defending time to reframe entirely. I agreed to appear on Nonprofit Nation, a podcast with 40,000 subscribers in the sector. The host, Derek Salinas, didn't pull punches. Your parents say you're destroying family legacy out of spite, he said 15 minutes in. I'm destroying a protection racket, I replied. Look at the numbers. The average nonprofit using traditional vendors loses 43% to inflated costs and unnecessary services. That's not legacy, that's theft with extra steps. Strong words. Accurate words. When a catering company charges $12,000 for a dinner that costs $4,000 to produce, when venue partnerships lock organizations into 5-year contracts with 30% annual increases, when donation processing takes 8% off the top, that's not business. That's exploitation of people trying to do good. The episode dropped on a Monday. By Wednesday, it had 60,000 downloads. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the IRS. Amelia had filed a whistleblower complaint about the Whitmore Trust's vendor relationships, suggesting potential private benefit violations that could threaten their tax-exempt status. The IRS doesn't comment on investigations, but within a week, 3 Whitmore board members quietly resigned to pursue other opportunities. Victoria's next move was vicious. She had their PR firm release a statement expressing concern for Elena's well-being and suggesting my recent erratic behavior might stem from unaddressed psychological issues requiring professional intervention. I'd expected this. Amelia had too. "Counterstatements ready," she said, hitting send to every major nonprofit publication. "Including the fun part, we're announcing your speaking slot at the National Philanthropy Summit next month. Hard to paint you as unstable when the industry's biggest conference just gave you a keynote." The summit booking was Iris's doing. She'd called in 20 years of favors to get me that stage. "You'll have 800 nonprofit executives in that room," she'd said. "Make it count." Meanwhile, our client base kept growing. The transparency we offered was addictive once donors saw where their money actually went. They demanded it everywhere. Organizations using Gala reported 30% increases in recurring donations. Then came the C&D letter that actually mattered not to me, but to my clients. Whitmore Trust's lawyers sent notices to every Gala client, threatening to pull funding and venue access if they continued using our platform. But they'd made a critical error. They put it in writing. Textbook tortious interference. Amelia laughed. Actually laughed, reading the letters. They just handed us a silver bullet. We filed suit the next day, not just for interference, but for antitrust violations. The complaint was public record, 68 pages detailing how the Whitmore network operated as a de facto monopoly in nonprofit event services. The press loved it. David versus Goliath in the charity world. Tech startup takes on philanthropy's old guard. The algorithm that could reform nonprofits. But my favorite headline came from the Hawthorne Gazette: "Local woman sues parents' empire, cites systemic corruption." Leonard called me once, at 2:17 a.m. I answered. "You're destroying everything we built," he said, voice slurred, drunk or tired, maybe both. "No," I replied. "I'm documenting everything you built. There's a difference. We made you. Everything you have. Everything I have, I built despite you, and everything you have is built on taking percentages from people trying to help others. We're done, Leonard. No more calls." I hung up and blocked the number. The summit was in 3 weeks. Kindled Futures Foundation, the national organization with 50 galas annually, had reached out about a potential partnership. They wanted to see GalaGrid in action at scale. "If we get kindled," Theo said, running projections, "we become the industry standard overnight. Every regional nonprofit will follow their lead. Then we better make sure the platform's bulletproof," I said, "because if we get that shot, the Whitmores will throw everything they have at stopping us." Amelia nodded, adding another note to her whiteboard. "Let them try. We have receipts now. Literally." The legal war was escalating. The PR battle was intensifying. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting from beneath anymore. I was fighting to win. The Kindled Futures boardroom occupied the 40th floor of a Chicago high-rise, all glass and steel and calculated intimidation. 5 board members sat across from me, their faces carefully neutral as I set up the demonstration. Ms. Carter, the CEO, Robert Huang, began. "We manage 50 annual galas across 30 states. Our events raise over $200 million yearly. Why should we risk our entire operation on an untested platform? Because it's not untested, I replied, pulling up our metrics. 16 organizations, 43 events, 0 critical failures, and more importantly, I switched to the impact ledger screen. Complete donor transparency. I ran them through a simulation 1,000-person gala with multiple vendors, live auction, streaming component, and real-time donation processing. Then I killed the main server. System failure, I announced. Catastrophic server crash. The board members leaned forward as the screen flickered, then stabilized. Our backup systems had kicked in within 3 seconds. The event continued seamlessly, data intact, donations processing. We built this assuming everything would go wrong, I explained. Because in my experience, it usually does sometimes deliberately. Sarah Winters, their CFO, studied the cost projections. You're showing 35% savings. That seems optimistic. It's conservative. Let me show you why. I pulled up a standard vendor contract from one of their recent galas, public information from their annual report. Your Baltimore event paid $18,000 for audio-visual services. The actual equipment rental cost $4,000. The rest, markup, coordination fees, and kickbacks disguised as consulting. That's a serious accusation, Robert said carefully. It's math, and I have the receipts. I showed them invoice comparisons from our clients, anonymized but devastating. Same services, different prices, depending on who was asking and who was getting a cut. The room went quiet. Then Charles Morton, their oldest board member, spoke up. Your parents have already contacted us. They suggested you're unstable, possibly vindictive. They provided documentation. My stomach clenched, but I'd prepared for this. May I see what they sent? They slid a folder across the table. Inside, selective screenshots from family texts. A psychiatric evaluation from when I was 22 and dealing with anxiety. Even a photo from college showing me drunk at a party. All crafted to paint a picture of instability. Interesting, I said calmly. Now let me show you what they didn't send. I opened my laptop and pulled up the complete Project Porcelain files Evan had provided. Every email, every strategy session, every coordinated attack. This is their playbook for destroying my company, I said, scrolling through the evidence. Notice the date on this email 3 days before they contacted you. They call it preemptive character assassination. Sarah was reading intently. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. Among other things, my lawyers have filed charges, but that's not why I'm showing you this. I closed the laptop. I'm showing you because transparency isn't just our product, it's our practice. You want to know who you're dealing with. Here's everything. The good, the bad, the lawsuit-worthy. Robert exchanged glances with his board. We need to discuss this internally. But first, one more test. Can you handle a live event with 1 day's notice? When and where? Tomorrow. Our donor appreciation lunch. 300 people. Our current vendor just had a family emergency. He used air quotes. Oddly timed, wouldn't you say? I recognized the setup. The Whitmores had pulled strings to create a crisis, betting I couldn't deliver. Send me the requirements. We'll have everything configured by 8 a.m. I left the building and immediately called my team. All hands. We have 14 hours to set up a full deployment. We worked through the night. Theo handled the technical setup while Mara coordinated with local vendors we'd pre-vetted in Chicago. Jules managed logistics remotely. By 6 a.m., we had everything ready. The event went flawlessly. More than flawlessly when a donor asked about transparency. Robert pulled up our dashboard on the main screen, showing real-time allocation of funds. The room erupted in appreciation. But the real victory came during dessert. Robert's assistant rushed over with an iPad, showing a breaking news alert. Whitmore Trust under IRS investigation for private benefit violations. The whistleblower complaint had triggered a full audit. Someone, likely Evan, had provided internal documents showing systematic self-dealing. Well, Robert said quietly, that certainly clarifies things. After the lunch, the board reconvened. I waited in the hallway, watching Chicago sprawl beneath me. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "You've destroyed your family. I hope you're satisfied." I deleted it without responding. Sarah emerged first. "We want to run a pilot. One major event, full transparency, live-streamed metrics. If you succeed, we'll roll out nationally." "Which event?" "Our National Excellence Gala. 2,000 attendees, simultaneous locations in 5 cities. Unified giving platform? It's in 3 weeks." Robert had joined us. "We'll provide the specifications. You provide the revolution." I shook their hands, maintaining professional composure until the elevator doors closed. Then I collapsed against the wall, allowing myself 30 seconds of victory before calling Amelia. "They said yes to the pilot." "Beautiful. Because I just got word the court granted our injunction. The Whitmores can't interfere with your business operations while the lawsuit's pending." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were winning. The Riverlight Convention Hall gleamed under the October sun as we transformed it into Command Central for the Open Ledger Gala, our counter-event to the Whitmore Trust's annual fall fundraiser happening the same night across town. "Cameras are live," Theo announced from his station. "Dashboard goes public in T-2 hours. We'd invited every nonprofit executive, donor, and journalist in a 100-mile radius. Free admission, radical transparency, and a promise watch us run a 1,000-person event with complete operational visibility." "Local news wants a statement," Jules said, holding up her phone. "They're asking about the dueling galas." "Tell them it's not a duel," I replied, adjusting the massive LED screen that would display our real-time metrics. "It's a demonstration. Let the public judge which model serves them better." At 5:45 p.m., my phone rang. "Victoria." "Elena." Her voice was strained. "There's been a situation. Our caterer just informed us they're short 300 meals. The backup vendor can't deliver until 10 p.m. I knew this game create a crisis, then watch the old system scramble. Except this time, they'd created their own crisis. "That's unfortunate," I said neutrally. "Elena, please, we have 700 guests arriving in an hour. I'm asking for help." The word asking probably burned her throat. I looked at our prep area. We'd ordered 20% extra everything, built into our waste prevention algorithm. "I can't help you, Victoria, but I can sell you 300 meals at cost plus standard delivery. $4,200. Cash on delivery." Silence. Then, "That's exploitation." "That's the market rate, the exact rate your preferred vendors charge for emergency service. Shall I send the invoice?" She hung up. 20 minutes later, Leonard called. "Name your price." "I already did. This isn't a negotiation." At 6:30 p.m. As our doors opened and the dashboard went live on the main screen, a Whitmore assistant arrived with cash. We sent the meals. Professional transaction, nothing more. Our gala unfolded like clockwork made visible. Every ticket purchase popped up on screen. Every vendor payment displayed with documentation. The donation ticker showed not just amounts, but allocation 40% to direct services, 30% to infrastructure, 20% to expansion, 10% to operations. "This is revolutionary," Margaret Park from the Tribune said, recording the display. "Donors can see everything." At 8:15 p.m., we hit our first million in pledges. The room erupted, but the real triumph was the waste metric 4%. We'd predicted attendance within 3 people, food consumption within 5 pounds. Then I saw them. Victoria stood in our entrance, Leonard beside her, both in formal wear, both looking lost. Security started forward, but I waved them off. They approached slowly, past donors celebrating, past the screens showing everything they'd tried to hide for decades. "Impressive," Leonard said quietly, watching the dashboard. "Very impressive." Victoria's face was pale. "Our gala is experiencing difficulties, multiple vendor failures, the backup systems. There are no backup systems." "Of course not. They'd never needed them. The old boys network always came through until it didn't." Victoria started, then stopped, started again. The foundation needs your platform. Tonight, our donors are leaving. The press is calling it a disaster. I studied them. These people who'd made me feel worthless for 32 years, who'd tried to destroy my company, who'd just hours ago attempted to sabotage this very event. Follow me, I said. I led them to the back office where Mara was monitoring system performance. She looked up, startled. Pull up the Whitmore Trust profile, I told her. She did. We'd already built it, knowing this moment would come. Full implementation would take 3 hours, I said. You'd have partial functionality tonight, full platform by tomorrow. The cost? Whatever it takes, Leonard interrupted. The cost, I continued, starts with this. I handed them the iPad displaying the document Amelia had prepared, a public statement acknowledging their harassment campaign, their anti-competitive practices, and their systematic inflation of vendor prices, plus resignation from 6 conflicted vendor boards. This is extortion, Victoria whispered. This is accountability, the same thing we're selling everyone else. They read through it, their dynasty crumbling in real time on a tablet screen. Meanwhile, our gala continued flawlessly. The contrast wasn't lost on them. If we sign this, Leonard said slowly, you'll save tonight's event. No, if you sign this, you can purchase a standard commercial license. No family discount. No special treatment. You'll be client number 47. Victoria's hands shook as she signed. Leonard followed. The moment his stylus lifted, I took back the iPad. Mara, implement emergency deployment for the Whitmore Trust. Standard rates. As my parents watched Mara work their daughter's employee, their equal in this moment, Victoria asked quietly, Can we discuss an ongoing relationship, an advisory role? Perhaps. I looked at them, really looked. They seemed smaller than I remembered. No, your customers. Nothing more. Mara will handle your account. The door opened. Theo leaned in. Elena, we just hit 2 million. Robert Huang from Kindled is here. He wants to discuss national rollout. I left my parents in that small office, their empire reduced to a client number, and returned to my gala, my success, my terms. On stage, Robert was already announcing the partnership. The crowd roared. The dashboard showed 2,100,000 and climbing. In the corner of my eye, I saw Victoria and Leonard leaving through the service entrance. Heads down, shoulders bent. I didn't watch them go. I had a revolution to run. The applause washed over me as I stepped onto the stage of the Open Ledger Gala. Behind me, the LED wall displayed our final metrics: 2.3 million raised, 4% waste, 100% transparency. Every promise delivered. Robert Huang stood at the podium, contract in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Kindled Futures Foundation is partnering with Gala Grid Labs for all 50 of our national events. The crowd erupted. Phones came out, recording the moment that would reshape nonprofit fundraising forever. But my eyes were drawn to the side entrance, where Victoria and Leonard stood frozen, watching their daughter sign the deal that would obsolete their entire network. Ms. Carter, Robert said, gesturing me forward. Would you like to say something? I took the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces: nonprofit directors, donors, journalists, all witnesses to this revolution. In my peripheral vision, I saw Victoria grip Leonard's arm, mascara streaking her cheeks. Transparency isn't just about showing where money goes, I said, my voice steady. It's about revealing who we really are. For too long, this industry has hidden behind tradition, behind closed doors, behind the excuse that this is how things have always been done. The dashboard behind me updated another donation, another real-time proof of trust. Tonight, we end that. Every dollar tracked, every vendor accountable, every nonprofit empowered to do more with less waste. I paused, meeting Victoria's eyes across the room. No more gatekeepers, no more exploitation disguised as charity. I signed the contract on stage, each signature stroke projecting on the screen behind me. The moment my pen lifted, completing the partnership that would roll Gala Grid nationwide, Victoria turned and walked out, Leonard following. They never made another attempt to contact me. Within 6 months, the Whitmore Trust had dissolved, their donors migrating to organizations with transparent operations. The old vendor network collapsed like dominoes, some adapted to fair pricing, others simply vanished. But that night, standing on that stage, I wasn't thinking about the future. I was thinking about every humiliation, every dismissal, every time they'd made me feel worthless, and how none of it mattered anymore. They taught me how to live for appearances, I said into the microphone, the crowd hanging on every word. But data taught me how to strip appearances away. They laughed when I stood beneath their spotlight. Tonight, I write the rules. The final number on the dashboard ticked up 2.5 million raised in 4 hours, with 88% going directly to causes instead of the industry standard 40%. I handed the microphone back to Robert and walked off stage, past the celebrating crowd, past the journalists calling for statements, past everything I'd built from the ashes of my former life. In the parking lot, I found a handwritten note under my windshield wiper. Victoria's handwriting. "We created a monster." I crumpled it, let it fall to the asphalt. They hadn't created anything. They'd just cleared the path for who I was always meant to become. 3 months later, Gala Grid was valued at $50 million. We had 360 organizations on the platform across 40 states. The IRS investigation into the Whitmore Trust resulted in federal charges and asset forfeiture. I never spoke to my parents again. They made one final attempt to enter my building, claiming they wanted to make amends. Security turned them away, following the explicit instructions I'd left. They are not family. They are not welcome. They are nothing to me now. The last I heard, they'd moved to Florida, living off what remained after the lawyers and fines. Sometimes charity event planners would ask if I was related to those Whitmores. No, I'd say simply, I'm not. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. I was Elena Carter, founder of Gala Grid Labs, the woman who revolutionized nonprofit transparency, the woman who'd taken their mockery and built an empire from it. They'd taught me that power meant making others feel small. But real power was making their entire world irrelevant. I stood in my office on the 40th floor, higher than they'd ever climbed, looking out at the city lights. Each one a potential partner, a future client, a piece of the new ecosystem we'd built. They were right about one thing at that gala where this all started. I wasn't suited for their table. I was meant to flip it over and build something better from the wreckage. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate triumph. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you driving to work, relaxing at home, or perhaps taking a walk? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like Elena's, and share your thoughts on what you would have done in her situation. Would you have forgiven your parents, or stood your ground like Elena did? I'd love to hear your perspective.